She's a faculty member here at UCSC, and she's known for her work as an anthropologist and also as a filmmaker, where she explored issues of war and social justice. And she's actually organized a whole track for this afternoon, where she's going to show one of the films that she's making on a garden project in Watsonville. And they're going to be the actual people who participated in the making of the film, and it's going to be followed up by a discussion panel. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you so much, Manel, and thank you everyone for, thank you for being invited to speak. So I'll tell a little bit about myself, just a little bit of background, and to get into why I think storytelling is so important. And then describe a little bit how the film collective with my students came about in collaboration with community organizations in Watsonville to create a collaboratively authored film about the River Park Garden. So I'm an anthropologist and a filmmaker by training. I actually did my undergraduate degree here in the 90s, and that's how I got introduced to anthropology. And then I was in a course similar to the one I'm teaching, and I made a little film. At the time, Santa Cruz was the most prepared town for Y2K, and I was curious about, what's all this anxiety around this technology and this sort of technological apocalypse? And so a group of students, we made a little film and interviewed people in town and just learned, why are people preparing, right? So, and I kind of got the filmmaker bug. It was a wonderful excuse to talk to people, basically, that I wouldn't normally have the reason to talk to. So I worked for a little while, actually in Watsonville and in Arizona, and then went to graduate school at New York University, where I got my doctoral degree in anthropology, and then also did an interdisciplinary program with the Tisch School of Arts with film and really focusing on ethnographic film. So, I've just recently actually finished my first feature, which came out of my doctoral research, called Bodies at War. In Spanish, it's called Mina. And it basically gives a window into people's lives who've been injured by landmines in Colombia. So Colombia is considered now one of the countries with the highest incidence of landmine injuries. It's resulting out of decades of civil war there. And really looking at the whole rehabilitation industry and prosthetic industry that has grown up around this, what is seen as a sort of humanitarian crisis. The way, I got involved in that, so my family's originally from Colombia. I'd visited Colombia all my life as a child. And then when I became a researcher, suddenly putting on the hat of as a sort of budding anthropologist, I started learning about, I always read the newspaper and started seeing these AP World Stream reports and national, newspapers in Colombia reporting this landmine problem in Colombia. And this was something that no one really talked about. It wasn't really part of the public consciousness. So I wanted to understand that. And so one of the things that were being reported were these, massive military parades where soldiers were pushing the wheelchairs of their limbless comrades down La Calle Séptima in Bogotá. And this was really striking to me, and I decided to buy my video camera and start filming these parades. And then this led into me asking questions, what does it actually mean for people who are in these parades, to kind of get on in the world after this injury? So I was able to, get access to the military hospital in Bogotá and did a long-term so this was over a decade of work, of long-term ethnographic research. And civilians also injured by landmines who don't have access to care but are striving or have their own kind of desires for these sort of prosthetic objects and what that means for people. So the attraction to film in the beginning was really about its power to bring together publics. As doing scholarly writing, there's a certain kind of meditation one is doing, or research or questions or dialogue you're having with people within discipline. But film is much more for a broader audience, and that's what was really attracting me. And then I after I graduated from my doctoral degree, I was lucky to get a National Science Foundation grant that covered 2 years of ethnographic research looking at experimental treatments for post-traumatic stress disorder in the U.S. military. And one of the treatments that I first started tracking or asking questions about is called virtual reality exposure therapy. And what that involves is the patient wears a headset, okay, where you have 3D visuals. And this is before Oculus Rift came out. So these were like $20,000 systems that I had encountered first in the Manhattan Veteran Affairs Hospital, was able to do a year of work in the Manhattan VA and then a year of work in Southern California, where these programs and therapies are actually developed, with Hollywood and the gaming industry and university psychiatry. So in this treatment, the patient wears this headset. It's an animation, very kind of generic scenarios. They're either driving in a Humvee or going through a village. And this is, the scenario's Iraq at the time. Now they have virtual Afghanistan as well. And so the idea is that, and they're also on a stage that shakes, so if a bomb goes off, it'll shake. They have a scent machine with 100 different scents. And headphones where they have all these sounds, and it really involves the coming together of all these different companies and contracts to create this therapy. So on one hand, what I was curious about is you have a VA system that there's a controversy about its inefficiency, veterans not being able to get their health care, and then on the other hand, this multi-billion-dollar therapeutic being developed that will more efficiently within 2 to 6 sessions, cure PTSD or what they call stress inoculation, prevent it. And so this was very curious to me, kind of, both kind of as an economic model, but also a model for reimagining warfare, the mind, and what we consider post-traumatic stress disorder, which actually, didn't really come into the DSM until 1981. So it's a fairly new, and yet we're seeing these rapid shifts. And so one of the, it was really interesting because there was, as me as an ethnographer, there was a great interest in me being an anthropologist. And so, even at one point when I was at this, they do these they work with, the military works with these TV studios where they create these whole villages. This was Afghani village when I was doing the research there, where you do these reenactments. They had me dress up as an Afghani person, and I was having to do these sort of role plays with the soldiers. And so there was a lot of this idea of cultural immersion is very interesting in the U.S. military right now, and I was feeling troubled as an anthropologist and really thinking, what do we really mean by cultural immersion, right? And what is truly ethnography? Is it simply immersing and manipulating the bodily senses, dividing the senses into sound, smell, vibration? Or, is there something that we as ethnographers is much more of a practice that happens over time, where we actually have to listen to people's stories and are embedded into a politic, a history, and meaning. And so these were what my intervention increasingly has become, and I just got funding for next year to complete my second feature film, Virtual War Memories of Abu Ghraib, which tells the story of two veterans, Mike Farina and Jerry De La Sala, who meet at Abu Ghraib and become best friends. And they've gone, after their deployment at Abu Ghraib, Jerry leaves the military but goes through virtual reality exposure therapy and experiments with these different kinds of treatments that are now undergoing clinical trials. And Mike Farina, who has gone through a lot of this role-playing and what they call stress inoculation training. And so really it's a story of friendship, but through that you learn about these different kind of techniques and technologies that people are going through in a contemporary war where less than, I think, 1% of Americans actually deploy. So very different from Vietnam, where most people there was many more people in the military, and so you could have longer rest periods. Now the military is constrained. You have less people to deploy, and therefore the big experiment is how do we deploy these people over and over and over again with shorter rest periods. So there's also a question of labor and the reorganization of labor and economy. So through a lot of the research around, for example, virtual exposure therapy and these other stress inoculation trainings is a reading of what is called biomarkers. So, are the palms of the patient sweating? Is their heartbeat beating rapidly? Do they have tense composure? Okay, so and this is the aim is to have more and more sophisticated technologies to measure these sort of things on the surface of the body and creating this kind of data generation. Okay, so we're in. That is a particular model. And so then if you are exposed multiple times to this traumatic scenario and you no longer are having biomarker stressors, then now you are cured from PTSD. That's a particular way of imagining trauma and experience. And as an anthropologist, I felt, well, the way that I'm trained, or my methodology, is really to follow people's lives over years. A year's time. So data generation is very effective. It is very attractive to funders. It's very attractive to industry because it's a quick and easy way to create knowledge production. So if you can imagine, if you kind of took a bird's eye view on a university and you looked at a laboratory, where that you can do testing on mice or rats, right? The mice are very attractive model organisms because you can reproduce them very quickly, and you can get your data and then put a report out into the world, right? I consider anthropologists we're more elephants, and we take a lot of more time and look at these broader kind of totalities. And so it's much more about doing research in lived time and sitting down and listening to stories. And I think that in a time where there's, this data deluge, that there might be, it's important to look at maybe a slower approach to science and one that's steeped in cultural analysis. So, I see cultural analysis as requiring observation of ordinary life. Lived inside and outside a laboratory where language and everyday speech, history, and social relationships form the very fabric of reality in its various manifestations, political, economic, social, and what we deem as nature and the concrete object world. So, what I'm teaching my students, and I will get to the River Park Garden Project, is, what really happens when the elephant breaks open the mouse's cage. And what I'm proposing is the daily unfolding of life and all its uncertainties. And it's really interesting. I'm trained as an anthropologist, but I'm located in a sociology department. And one of the ideas in sociology is Durkheim had this notion of the social fact, right? So he was able to, for example, in his book Suicide, one of the groundbreaking discoveries was through statistical analyses. He discovered, we see that Protestants, I think it's Protestants commit suicide at a higher rate than Catholics or something like that. So now you have the social fact. This is a social trend that, one can numerically track. And this is a major contribution, and still within sociology, statistical analysis is very important, and I think that it has an important role. But what my approach is, well, what if we disarm ourselves with these kind of tools, methodological tools, that we can actually just sit and listen to people's stories. And I'm thinking of fantasy and science fiction writer Ursula Le Guin, when in her short story, It Was This Dark and Stormy Night, or Why Are We Huddling Around the Campfire? And she says, we are huddling around the campfire. Why are we huddling about the campfire? Why do we tell tales, or tales about tales? Why do we bear witness true or false. It is because we are so organized as to take actions that prevent our dissolution into the surroundings. And I think, in this world that we've been describing that's highly apocalyptic, where we're seeing, a world perhaps in capitalist ruins. I think that Anit Singh in her latest book on mushrooms, where she really talks about that perhaps storytelling is our only way to survive the precarity of this world. And I think stories are so important still because they allow us to be protagonists within our own world. There are social determinants and social forces that are shaping our opportunities and our lives. But nonetheless, we are also individuals who are maneuvering through the world and with lived experience, everyday experience, with many kinds of intersections and encounters. And so, there is this sort of Enlightenment ideal around freedom that gets often, we can sort of scoff at it as scholars. But my work with veterans, really pushed back and forced me to rethink freedom and maybe take it seriously, because so many of my veterans, the veterans that I'm working with, who feel trapped within their own alienation of deploying to multiple foreign wars, perhaps not even agreeing with those wars, but feeling that they'd rather deploy than live back at home that feels so alien. And so I've tried to rethink freedom and thinking about it as an ability to ascribe meaning to one's own experiences and actions, and to think through those things in an imaginative way. So in ways that affirm our social relationships and give us sort of a feeling of belonging in the world. And so that was really what I wanted to, in my visual sociology course that has the accompanying video lab, to really something to give to my students. It's there's so many things we can know in the world today. We get on the internet, you type something in Google, and you have the information. There's so much that we know, right? But that knowledge often obfuscates what we don't know. And there is so much uncertainty in the world. And I think embracing uncertainty, allowing stories to emerge, doing a documentary film where you don't have the script before you begin, that you must actually, we had certain boundaries. I mean, we knew we would be working within one garden. But then, what the stories that came out from that garden and the people who are actual urban gardeners, that we didn't know. And it was something, it's a way to perhaps, surrender oneself to the unexpected. And so that was perhaps one of the biggest challenges and joys of teaching this course. So the collaboration, it's a collaborative project. I just arrived from New York City this fall, and my sister lives here and actually did her doctorate in environmental studies and is executive director of an organization called Community Agroecology Network. So, and this is Rose Cohen is my sister. So we were discussing, I thought, it would be great to do this collaboration. I don't necessarily do work on gardens. I've been doing, but this is kind of could be a very beautiful project. So maybe we can do this collaboration. So, okay, this sounds great. And she had been already working with the River Park Garden in Watsonville. Along with Mesa Verde Gardens, which is an organization headed by Anna Rasmussen, who will be here later today. And she really works with the city of Watsonville to get abandoned pieces of land by the city to be able to reclaim them for communities so that they can create gardens. This particular garden, River Park, it's only a year old, and it's had its own struggles. River Park is one of the most economically depressed communities in Watsonville, and the area where they wanted to build their garden was all cement. So unlike some of all the other gardens, these community gardens that were they had some soil or dirt that they could kind of mix the soil and create a garden. This actually they had to build raised beds and then they didn't have the money for organic soil. So then they had to figure out how to mix soil, grow certain kinds of plants to create soil that was actually would sustain life. And so they've gone, it's been a huge community effort. And they have built their garden. And now they're really striving to keep that garden, as you probably might be, or what you might be aware of, is here in Santa Cruz we have the Beach Flats garden that has been a major fight, right? A major struggle to keep that garden. So the River Park Garden has its own struggles. And so it's been a real adventure for me, you know, I usually am the director and do a lot of the work. And then if I get money, then I'm able to have people help me with post-production of my films. But this was really an experiment in collaboration where it was complete, there was no head director. It was about collective kind of filmmaking, which has its own complications. You know, every week when we'd meet, we'd have to discuss how the collective was working, what roles people are taking. So it was a wonderful kind of experiment. And we'll be screening the film at 1:30 at Merrill 102. And so the film will screen, it's about 18 minutes, and then the students collaborated with a Watsonville youth team. So it's 6 of my students and 15 youth, ages 12 to 17. And so I taught the students how to use the camera and the different, we talked about how you shoot and how you think about shooting and putting together a film. And then they did workshops with the youth where then they taught the youth how to do this as well. And then they could collaborate on the filming. So after the screening, then the youth team and the students will come up to the front of the room and answer questions. And we've brought up urban gardeners, so there's 17 urban gardeners from the River Park Garden Project, community leaders, the youth team, and the parents, and so they'll all be there. And then after the Q&A with the collective, we'll have a roundtable discussion about community building, educational access, and communities of South County. So I think it promises to be a really rich event. So I hope to see you at the screening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there's time.
Thanks very much, Emily, for this wonderful overview of your work.